Our organizations have to work to make sure that there are people who are still interested in entering into our space, and that they can meet with people who are already in these roles to understand the needs of these roles, like the things that you need to understand and know to have in your arsenal so that you can go after jobs like this.
Darnelle, welcome. I'm Elena Johns. I'm the editor-in-chief at Broad Street Review, and I am here in the virtual studio with Darnelle Radford, who, as we all know, usually is conducting the interviews for our Broad Street Review podcast, now in its 10th season. But now, in honor of Darnelle's new gig as executive director of Theatre Philadelphia, we're going to put Darnelle in the hot seat, and he's going to answer some questions for once in his life. Darnelle, what do you think about this?
No comment. I'm going to no comment everything.
Well, this is going to be a fun one then.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us here in the virtual studio, Darnelle. We appreciate your time.
It is funny because if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you.
Yeah.
But you're seeing me on the other side of the screen instead of where I'm normally sitting. I think the studio knew.
Medicine.
Yes, I think the studio knew that I was going to be the guest. So it worked out.
Yes. Well, I would love to just dive right in here, Darnelle. And so I know that one thing you love to ask theater artists from all different walks is, what was their path to getting into theater? And you get into all of these really deep and interesting sections of their history. I want to hear it from you. And you can go back as far as you want to. What was your path into the theater industry? How did you get here?
So my first taste of theater was I had two lines in a school play in fourth grade. I played a cop, and I forget what I said, but I was basically dressed in half of my Sunday best and a plastic set of handcuffs. I remember not being there on time, like being in a car as we were barreling down to get to the school, just being mad, like unacceptable. Like even at that time, I was like, I will either be on time or I'm not coming. But I got there minutes before my cue, which was ridiculous. I would never do that in life now. But that sounds like a nightmare that I would have today. Yeah. So that was in fourth grade. But in between that, I had joined the choir, the school choir, and so I thought that was going to be my foundation. It ended up, it was my foundation all through high school, but it was my freshman year in high school when I ran cross country my first year of high school, and I got used to being after school. And so when cross country season ended, I didn't want to go into track. I just felt like it was too much of a demand, and I think I could have done it. I just didn't want to push myself. And so one of my friends who was like one of the cool kids, like considered the popular in our class, he was also a twin. He was recruiting people to join the drama club. And I was like, what? The drama club? Isn't that for nerds? Like we all felt the stereotypical thing you would feel as young kids. It was like, no, it's cool to be great. I'll be there and everything. I was like, okay, well, if Jonathan's going to be on the drama club, then I can be on the drama club. So I went with him to the drama club. It was me and two other people, I think. And I swear what I saw from the theater, from the pit, looking over to stage left, house right, you could see Jonathan shaking someone's hand and walking out of the stage, walking out of the side door. I was like, that son of a tricked us into joining so that he didn't have to join.
Oh my goodness.
And so I felt like cheated by that, but I was like, I can't leave now. I was like, all right, I'll finalize this meeting and then I probably won't come back. And before the meeting ended, I was assigned to sound design, or I was an assistant to the sound designer because in high school, the full role went to a senior. And so the senior was a sound designer and I was the assistant. As soon as I got started in that, the senior became ineligible because of grades. And so I become the de facto sound designer. And I remember at the time we were handling the sound on a Sony mini disc.
Mm,
And while that thing was so cool, it was a heavy behemoth. It had
mhm,
these unique discs in it that you couldn't use for anything else.
mhm,
And yeah, so we had all the sound on that, and I had to figure that stuff out.
mhm,
And it was like my first taste of theater and its complexity of like dropping you into a scenario
mhm.
and you hope there's enough time for you to figure things out.
Yeah.
So I did that. That was freshman year, the fall,
Mhm.
and then I ended up being our stage manager for the whole time I was at high school.
So, from that when you initially got dropped in there and then you encountered all this technical stuff, what was it that brought you back in? What was it that hooked you?
Well, that first production, I was a sound designer, but the second production was our spring production, and that was the musical Fame.
Mhm.
And so I was drawn back in because I was a member of the choir.
Mm.
So being part of the musical was something that I wouldn't have been opposed to doing. And so I did audition for that. And I was given like an ensemble role, but I understudied a lead,
Oh,
which if you know Fame, there's a character named Joe Vegas. And he has an interesting song called "Can't Keep It Down." It's a high school,
mhm.
so just think about what that might mean. And so the same senior who was a sound designer was also ineligible for grades and could not play the role of Joe Vegas.
Oh my god.
And so I played that role, but I'm obviously not of Latin descent. So we changed Joe Vegas to Joe Davis. And so I stepped up to that role because I was
Mhm.
carrying it while he wasn't there anyway.
Mhm.
It's so interesting because in theater, I've always just been at the right place at the right time.
Mm.
Later on in college, I was a stage manager for production of Jeffrey by Paul Rudnick, and I was reading the lines for some ancillary characters that we
Mhm.
hadn't filled yet. And so after a while, they were just like, "Do you want to just do these? You already know the lines and everything." And I'm like, "Okay." And so this is how I get acting gigs. You just hang
Mhm.
out long enough, and they hand them to you.
Yeah. It seems like, imagine if, those classmates of yours had kept their grades up, they might be where you are today.
Who knows?
Who
They could be
knows?
running Theater Philadelphia.
Well, I love hearing that backstory, and I think longtime podcast listeners, I hope, appreciate that too. And one thing I wanna ask you too nowadays is I swear, so I see a lot of theater in my job at BSR, but I don't see as much as you, I don't think. I feel like I don't go to the theater without seeing you there. How many shows do you think you see a year?
Well, I know I had an interview somewhere in the haze of the pandemic with Cameron Kelsall, one of our
Mm,
contributors.
yeah, yeah.
And I remember at the time saying that we both saw around 200 productions
Mhm.
in the year. And I know that it's considerably less than that now.
Mhm.
I do know that, you know, as far as our 10th season has gone, I've been moving pretty quickly because of there were a lot of shows in the fringe that I want to have a conversation about. And so
Yeah,
right now this is the 19th episode we've done in the season.
yeah.
And normally we'll do 22 shows a season, which has been, you know, fluctuating,
Mhm.
you know, during the pandemic. But so I think I saw every show that I covered, so that's at least 18. I'm probably going to say that I've probably seen about 30 shows already,
So far this season.
which is probably
Say,
more.
like, since August.
Yeah, I would have to go back to my calendar to get an official list. But I use my Instagram to help me
There you go.
figure that out because I
Tonight's
always
experience.
post.
I
Yeah.
always look for your tonight's experience posts. I see what you're up to.
Yes, and I think that that's valuable. I started doing that because I wanted people to understand that it wasn't hard to make theater a part of your day.
Mm,
So I was saying like, yeah, I hopped on the train. You know, I took the Chestnut Hill West to Allen Lane and I walked a couple of blocks through a
mhm,
beautiful neighborhood to
yeah,
get to Germantown Avenue to head over to the Sedgwick to see
exactly.
Quintessence production, So I would always try to point those things out. And then I just started realizing that for me, we were hearing a lot during the pandemic about people being comfortable at home watching Netflix and so on. And
Yeah.
I felt like that was a cop out, sort of an easy thing. People who watch Netflix don't need a, carve out to watch Netflix. Like, it's on demand. So you can watch whenever you want. So I didn't buy that people were just staying inside because Netflix was fruitful.
Mm.
And so what I realized is that in the prime time slot where I could sit and watch something new on, national TV, or I could go out and experience live theater and be out
Mhm.
in the city and walk around town and, grab a bite to eat and maybe see something that was happening in the city that I didn't expect to see or that I wouldn't have seen had I stayed at home. And so I just got in that mindset. I was like, okay, this window of time is not only like recreational or experiential, it's also the time I allocate for Emory as the podcast network.
Mhm. Mhm.
And also saying like part of the job of covering these productions is going to them.
Yes.
So it just sort of worked out that in that window of time, I was either going because I covered the show, or I'm covering the show, or I'm going because that block was allocated to cover the show or go to the show. And so it just became a thing. And I said, if I can put it on my calendar, I can make it happen.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that, and I think back to my earlier days as a theater critic when I was often going out to, like, 2, 3, 4 shows a week sometimes, which is a killer schedule when I was also working a different full-time job.
Hmm.
That's another story. But now as an editor, obviously, I don't have time to see as much as I did back when I was reviewing all the time, but I do see as much as I can because that informs my coverage. I like it's I can't do my job here at BSR just from behind a desk relying on, what I hear or what folks tell me. I have to go out and see what's what and know, what's good to send my writers to, like what's good to recommend to folks. And that's just a constant job that I know you really understand too here on the
Yeah.
pod.
And I also feel like I do engage with a lot of people over my day for various things.
Mhm.
And I always like to weave in, some bit of theater. And so we'll have a conversation and it's talking about, some chaotic situation in a relationship. And I'm like, oh, that reminds me of the production I just saw a couple of days ago. I'm
Mhm.
always trying to find a way to call back to theater so that people can see like our theater community is very much finger on the pulse about, what's going on in the world. And,
Yeah.
a lot of things we're thinking about are being sort of unpacked on stage.
Artists are chewing on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And I find too, like when I'm feeling down, like the world has me down, that's when I purposely think like, okay, what like live art space can I get into? And it could be a museum exhibition or something, or it could be a concert or a play or the opera or whatever. But when I walk out of there, I feel better. Like I feel lifted, I feel connected, I feel like there's something outside of myself. And it like I just countless times it's helped me when I'm in a really dark spot.
Absolutely. Many times I walk out of a theater with the same kind of smile and relief and assurance that I have when I end a podcast interview.
Mm,
It's just like, that was great. I'm like full because of this.
yeah.
And yeah, so I always feel like that. And I don't necessarily feel it like a drug that dies down over
Mhm.
time and then I have to go back and refill the coffer. But I feel like I've normalized theater in my life, and
Mhm.
so it doesn't feel excessive. It doesn't feel like a burden to do
No.
it.
Yeah.
It feels like, this is my life. I remember there used to be these commercials that would say, these other things are my anti-drug. Like, instead of being on the street doing drugs, I'm skateboarding, I'm making arts and crafts and so on. And so I used to say that theater is my anti-drug
Mm,
because it was just this thing that if I was too far away from it, this is why my life didn't feel balanced.
mm,
And so I had to get thee to a theater.
mm. Yeah, it's like, maybe it's like, folks who are really dedicated to working out or like their gym life, and maybe they
Hmm.
don't feel
Yeah.
they don't feel good if they skip a workout. It's like when I remember back in the depths of the pandemic and I couldn't go to any shows, that had a big like, emotional impact on me. I missed it, and I remember really well some of those first times after, after I was vaccinated, I was able to mask up and get back into a theater occasionally, and I remember just, like, feeling all teary, like, I was emotional because I
Mhm.
just realized how much I had missed that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so I hear
I
that.
one of the most impactful moments like that was when the Philadelphia Orchestra returned,
Mm,
and they did that free event that was, like, reopening the Kimmel
mhm.
and the conductor,
That's again. Yeah.
Yannick Segan comes out and says, "Welcome, this is your Philadelphia Orchestra." And there was like a 7-minute standing ovation, and everybody's crying and teary-eyed, and we're just like, "Yes, yes, this is our orchestra. This is our space. We are happy to be in here." It was just a beautiful moment in a beautiful space. I think at the time it was still called I think it was still Verizon Hall. Um,
Yeah,
but it was still beautiful to be in that space with all these people who waited in line outside to get inside,
right.
and then we were all in that collective space, and it was like, yeah, yeah, like people who didn't know each other, like we all did this together. We all believed so much that having this back mattered to the community, to the city
Mhm.
as a whole, that we were all here to participate in its return.
Yeah,
And that was such a great moment.
yeah. I think and kind of like one thing I wanted to get into with you, which I think we've already been doing for the last 5 or 10 minutes, is this when people say that live theater is irrelevant or it's done, and I'm like, that's I on one hand, I understand that there's just a huge section of the American public that isn't going into a theater, and there are lots of barriers to that realistically, but on the other hand, it's absolutely not something that's done irrelevant, and I also think that we need to open up what our ideas of theater are. I think, like, political rallies are theater and sports games are theater, and there's so many I just think that as a species, we're never gonna stop gathering together to hear from one another, or be inspired or be entertained or whatever it is, like, I feel like it's in our DNA, and
Yeah.
we're not gonna quit doing that.
Yeah, and I think a lot more people classify as artists than they think.
Mm,
I thought about this when, I went to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. It's one of the art schools that didn't quite make it.
mhm, yep,
It closed way before UArts, but I do remember saying every single one of our categories is a collection of artists. Like we have culinary artists, we have
mhm,
graphic designers, we have industrial design technicians. They are artists. We have web designers, we have musicians,
mhm,
we have videographers and future filmmakers and so on. We had animators and all of that. So they were all artists. Like we
yeah,
were all in the same collective, but
yep,
sometimes you don't see how your art can serve another art form. And I used to make those conversations all the time. I would say, like, if we took one person from every degree program at the Art Institute of Philadelphia, that would make for one great arts organization.
yeah,
So often this is what I would do to recruit people to participate in theater. Some of the earlier people that helped me when I started represented theater company in 2005 were
mhm,
a lot of designers who, didn't see a path to theater. And I said, look, this is what we have websites too, like you can be a web designer for a theater company. You can be a graphic designer for a theater company,
yeah,
and all of those things. And it was really trying to find those threads that actually connect us. The one that gets me the most is when someone says they don't like musicals, but they go to concerts. I'm
yeah,
like,
okay,
a concert has a similar theatrical structure. If you went to Taylor Swift's concert or Beyonce's concert, those were theatrical events, in the vein of a musical where there's a lot of the same people, the same unions that work to make this happen, the same people behind the scenes who put this together to help these characters get dressed into
yeah,
new
yeah,
costumes and so on, and the elements
lighting,
that pull it all together. Like these are all theater. It's all theater.
yeah,
And so it's just a more elevated level, just like Broadway is an elevated level of regional theater.
sure,
Regional theater is elevated level of community theater.
Mhm.
and so on and so on. And
Yeah.
so all of these moments are just as valuable.
I mean, heck, I think probably most religious denominations are
Hmm.
practically a musical, right? Like,
Absolutely.
the spectacle of it and that communal experience and making music together,
Hmm.
hearing the mu like, it's yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah. When I was younger, I was a part of a mass choir, and that was so theatrical and so energetic and vibrant. Like,
Mhm,
if you've been to a church and you've heard a sermon and sometimes it drags and you feel really tired, like, not in a
mhm.
church with a mass choir. The mass choir is wakes you up, and you're just vibrating for a good period of time past that performance.
Yeah. So I wanna one thing I wanna land on with you is, and I think this is a topic that applies across not just theater, but others. I mean, we hear it about movies being made now and how it seems like no one wants to take a chance on anything new. It's all sort of these rehashes of intellectual property and franchises that we already have. And I saw someone commenting on this about Broadway specifically recently, saying that we don't have like big new things happening. All of the big shows are just repackaging or restaging what we've already got. So I wanted like what are your thoughts about this? Do you think that as an industry we're leaning too much toward what's familiar and trying to do what's known versus taking some risks? Like where are we with this?
I think, one, this is an interesting topic, and I do talk about this on my other podcast, The
Mhm.
Business of Theater, a working title. But I will say that I think what's happening is there's an attempt to pull in new audiences.
Mhm.
And so we use nostalgia to do that. And so we got to pull a property that was successful that people remember to kind of bring in, like, Back to the Future, as a musical.
Mhm. Yeah.
you know, Whether it works or not, it does pull in the people who remember that excitement, that energy. Like
And maybe they've
back,
never been to it.
yeah, yeah, like Back to the Future, the movie, part one, like still holds up. It's still just as exciting as, yeah, it was. And so why not try to strike with a musical version? I
Mhm.
also think that the producers who have the money to sustain Broadway have this intellectual property that's accessible to them. And so they're
Mhm.
saying, like, why not, let's retool this for the stage and see what happens. But I think when we get down to regional, I do feel like what I've experienced is that for a while, there was always this chase to be the first to get to a world premiere or a regional premiere.
Mhm.
And so we're constantly paying attention to what's getting a buzz that's not quite here yet, or
Mm.
maybe there
Mhm.
aren't licensing rights for it. And so it does feel like some companies are trying to chase that next thing. Like, we got to be the one to get it here
Mhm.
first. And that becomes a thing. I always think it's very interesting that every theater company has a play development process, has some kind of development process, but it doesn't always appear that there is a huge commitment to bringing new plays to the stage. I
Mm.
could be wrong, and I hope that I am wrong.
Yeah. Well, there are some companies that like specialize there, obviously, or like Playpen and things like that, which is great in our region. But yeah, for a lot of companies, yeah, that could
Mhm.
be true.
Yeah, so, I do think that it's just tough. It's like we wanna be in a place where society was so comfortable that art was just fruitful, and we were embracing new work, and we were putting the time into development because we had it. We
Mhm.
had the flexibility of people who supported new work that's coming, but now it's hard to get people to come out if they don't know that this is a sure thing.
Mhm.
We're constantly questioning the value of a Barrymore recommendation.
Mm.
Like, is this something that people are waiting for? Or, and if so, if they are waiting to hear that you're recommended, then they come to the show. Does this mean we need to run longer because we got to wait for a recommendation to get people to come to a show? Or
Mm.
this also questions what got people here before we were recommended?
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're all constantly having this conversation to figure out, like, what we have to do. Like, in most cases, we are big on saying we got to get more people to previews because they will go out into the world and talk about the show. And then once it opens,
Mm-hmm.
then that's going to help the run be successful. But I still think that, you know, there are many companies that have a very unique and specific mission. And I think that allows for a lot of diversity when it comes to our community and all of the theaters that we can experience. But I still think it's a bit of a challenge because we are looking for a surefire thing. And I think that that's also why we tend to see the same artists on stage because the
Yeah.
community knows
Yep.
of their work and the way they participate in a production and what they can bring. And so they kind of look for that. That doesn't necessarily help new artists coming up, because you could be fresh out of college and you were like tops in your class then, but now you're somebody who's still trying to build traction. And are they going to open a show with you if they
Mhm.
don't know you, even though
Yeah.
you're great? So there's a lot of that. And I think it does come down to the fact that there aren't as many people as we might think who are supporting the theater community.
Hmm.
I think I heard in a conversation, and I could be wrong, if there's 30,000 people out of the 1.5 million in our city,
Mm-hmm.
if there are 30,000 people that engage in theater, that's a very small subset of our city's citizenry
Mm-hmm.
who is actually supporting theater in some way. And so we're all chasing after them.
Yeah.
I don't think we've all figured out how to get new people in. I think we just get lucky when something stands out and reaches new people, and then
Mm-hmm.
we hope that we can sort of hook them. But it all sounds like a gimmick or a trick. And it's like, I don't know, you have to think about like how you got here. Yes, I may have been hoodwinked to get here.
Yeah, you personally, yeah.
But once I got here, I couldn't pull myself away. I think that we need to spend more time talking about how we got here.
Mm-hmm.
And so people can find those similarities because sometimes you just look up and you're like, I can't do that. Who says you can't do that? You're just thinking you can't do that. But like, let me put you in front of somebody who had a similar path or felt the same way. Like, I think we just need to hear more from our community about why we're still here. And I think when we get the opportunity to meet with the press, we are talking about a show that needs tickets sold.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not really talking about an institution that has great worker, has staff, and has people who are passionate and continuously thinking of new and creative things. It's also tricky that some of the media only wants to cover specific things, and so we can't tell them that how we're so organized as an organization and how we have this pipeline of things that we're doing because although they do want something new though, which is also a contradiction.
I mean, yeah. Well, I'm thinking I was so struck, and often when I've gone to see new work, like especially in the Fringe Festival, the most recent Fringe Festival, which I know sold a record number of tickets, the number of shows that I went to, including brand new shows that were full, like they had a waiting list. Like there was such great energy around those shows. I went, and then after the Fringe, we had, I think it was Azuka and Simpatico. Was it the team up where they did 1 pound 4 ounces
Yes.
with Khalil Munir?
Mhm.
And I went to see that show, which was so original and interesting. This solo performance memoir show with really strong Philly ties, but also live music and tap dancing.
Yeah.
It was so interesting, and I saw the description. I was like, I don't what is this? I need to be in the room and see this. And when I went to it, I went to I think it was a Sunday or a Saturday matinee, and it was so striking because the audience was so diverse. Like I, as a white person, was in the minority in that room, which is really rare when you go to the theater, like especially a matinee show. It tends to be a lot of white folks, a lot of folks who are older. And I looked around the room and I just see how racially diverse the audience was. It was also diverse by age, and it was full. The audience was full and the run sold out. And this was this brand new show with a really unique format. It just wasn't like anything else that I have seen ever. And it just was it was such a cool sign to me that when you do take a risk on that new, people do want to see it. And also people who haven't felt like the work has represented them before,
Mhm.
when the work represents them, they'll come out and see it, and that's a new audience that should have been there all along, but how can we open the door?
Yeah. I had a great chat with Khalil, and we also spoke about how Black men who may not traditionally enter into the theater space were in the audience for this and resonating
Yeah.
and really feeling the story that's being told here. And the thing is, like, yes, people do feel like they can't, like this isn't a space for them when the work is predominantly not produced with them in mind.
Mhm.
I can think all the way back to, I think, Interact Theater Company a long time ago did a play called The Elaborate Entrance of Chad Deity. It was a wrestling themed piece, and it
Mhm.
was it was at the Philadelphia Shakespeare Theater space they used there for that.
Mhm.
But I remember them talking about how this is pulling in a different audience for them because of the culture in the piece
Mhm.
was resonating with an audience who wasn't traditionally coming to Interact.
Yeah.
And that was great, but it sometimes seems like that ends up being elevated in this specific grab for their attention
Mm.
instead of just like putting up, here's what we have to offer. And then you look at it and say, oh, this is a well-rounded season. And that season, that offering in the middle of the season is really what's pulling me in. I'm going to get a subscription and just experience it all.
Mhm.
We don't always see that, but I remember way back when it felt like our theaters were starting to embrace more LGBTQ plus content,
Mhm.
where it just felt like out of nowhere we all said, "Let's do a show in May that's themed around LGBTQ plus."
Mhm.
Lining up with, at the time, was Equality Forum and
Mhm.
Pride Fest and all
Going into
those things.
Pride.
Yeah, and it's just like, you don't think we see what you're doing? It's like everybody got together in a room or some article came out and said, this is what we need to do. And everybody jumped on it then instead of really paying attention to the community that was already here.
Mhm.
I do think that there's kind of a thought that the high end donors who support us now may not be interested in a lot of this diversity.
Mm.
And I don't think that that's the way to even approach these potential donors. Like, we need to be talking about how we are trying to engage all of society, and we have to have these stories that reach everyone.
Yeah, and not do it in like a one-off way, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
here, you were represented at this show, check that off the list." Like, it needs to be like you were talking about that sort of arc of the whole season, like, it needs to be meaningfully integrated,
Hmm.
not just a one-off thing.
Yeah. And I think it can be done, but also, I remember a while back talking to a theater who, on their stage, there's a lot of diversity, but in their back of house, in their administration,
Mhm.
it was all, it was all white
Yeah.
theater professionals.
Mhm.
And I was like, I always love what you put on the stage, but then I look at your staffing and I wonder how you even made it happen. Like, these are also very interesting. If there isn't much culture there isn't a diverse culture that makes up your organization, how
Mhm.
can you put diverse work out? How can you present to a community that is diverse?
Mhm.
Unless your community isn't diverse or unless you're not trying to reach a certain community. I know that it's like we have Irish Heritage Theater. I'm not
Mhm.
expecting them to do anything else but Irish Heritage. Like, we
Yeah,
come
right?
to them, for Irish plays,
Mhm.
but if you're gonna claim in your mission statement that you have this broad, focus, then you have
Mhm.
to own up to that. And you can't let I mean, we have to rise above the risk and fear that maybe holds us back, or you have to be ready to explain that that's what you did. I know it's not as easy, it's not as cut and dry for everybody, but this is just how I see it as a theater goer
Mhm.
and as a member of the theater community. Because I've had many conversations over the years about the lack of what we want to see on our stages. And my conversation has always said that just means that there's more room. We don't have to expect the companies here to produce what's missing. We have to be the ones who want
Yeah.
to fill that gap.
We have
And
some
then,
agency in that.
yes, absolutely. And so that's a thing, but then you also have to figure out how to support it, how to fund it.
Mhm.
And again, this goes back to if the people who support us aren't willing to support these things, then we may not be able to get them in front of an audience.
Yeah. So I want to wrap us up soon by talking just a little bit about your exciting new role. Just real quick, a pair of questions for you. If you can tell me, I would love to know, can you think of a time when you were at the theater and you had some kind of like emotional or intellectual breakthrough that was significant? Like just a thing like, oh, I didn't get that and now I get it. And also kind of on the other side of that, has there been a time that you're sitting in the theater and you were really challenged or really uncomfortable?
Yeah. The first one, I'll go all the way back to my sort of introduction to our theater community. When I became a Barrymore nominator,
Mhm.
I went to a show that I think it was an Inish Nua production. It was called Crazy Gary's Mobile Disco. It was upstairs at the Khyber,
Mhm.
and it was a piece that took place in several acts. And we had to move our chairs. We had to physically move to another room for another scene to happen.
Mm.
And I just remember this is the first time I'd ever been to the Khyber, and I was like, "You're producing a show in this space?" And then the fact that we had to move and so on, and I was just like, "I don't understand how this qualifies." I was very upset at my experience there, and and so I talked to the coordinator at the time, who was Karen DeLossie,
Mhm.
and she said, I want you to just take a moment to think about it and then get back to me. And then I'm so glad that she did that because my unique my immediate response was just I'm inconvenienced here and I don't accept this.
Mm.
And but then when I thought about it, I realized the story called for this.
Mm.
And I was like, "Oh my god, this makes so much sense now."
Mm.
And I was like, "This fits." I was like, "That's it." And it totally changed my perspective on how I was approaching theater as a
Mm.
nominator. And it also piqued my curiosity, which ultimately spawned rep radio because
Wow.
I realized there's a lot I don't know here. And if I was lost, I was just going to hang on my first impression. And so I realized that the reason I want to have a chat is because I have questions and I have curiosity.
Mhm.
When I got to that, I guess I was in sort of an ignorant mindset where I was expecting perfection from all areas.
Mm.
And this space is not a traditional theater space. And so I can't expect that. I had to look at whether this is a compliment to the story they're trying to tell.
Mhm.
And it was. And I wasn't trying to see it that way at the time. And so that really changed my perspective. And I've told that story many times because I was like, my eyes were open after that. And
Mm.
I don't know, I almost didn't give that piece its due. And I'm
Mm.
so glad that I gave myself some time because I wasn't convinced to think about it differently. I just needed a moment to pull it all together. And so whenever I as a nominator, I would always wait 24 hours before I would form the opinion. I'm like, go to work, talk to someone about it, and then later on today, fill out your ballot.
And that's kind of a beautiful example of a response that we can give when someone comes at us to be like, "Hey, I didn't like this," or whatever. Like instead of being defensive or angry, to be, "Hey, do you want to think about this
Hmm.
some more?"
Sure.
Like that's
Absolutely.
it's a really interesting thing to model.
Sometimes your visceral response is just frustration and you need to get it out. But now that you've got it out, it's
Yeah.
almost like, do you still feel that way?
Right. Yeah. It's like so many people, or I mean, I hear from a lot of BSR readers, obviously, and obviously some of them are unhappy. They don't like a story, or we didn't cover something that they wanted us to cover, or whatever it is. And sometimes, and then when I answer them cordially, be like, "Hey," like even if they're angry about something, I answer and I say, "Hey, thanks for reading and responding. We're glad to have you engaging with Broad Street Review." And then often what answers back is like, "Oh, hello. I didn't know that you would answer." And all of a sudden it's this connection, and people, they feel like they've been heard, and then and it just kind of evaporates,
Yeah.
some of, whatever they were feeling. Well, let's close out by landing on your new job at Theater Philadelphia. I want to hear what you're excited about for this. I know that there's lots of things you're plugging in, and there may not be everything that you can speak to, but what's what's exciting for you, and how is this a leap for you from all of your other very long and deep experience on Philly's theater scene?
Yeah. Well, I think what's exciting about this was the community's response to me taking on this role.
Yeah. It was like
Um,
Philly's worst kept secret for a
yeah,
couple weeks that you were coming into this job, right?
but I've just been doing this work. I haven't been like checking in to see if everyone's responding. Like, am I getting all the likes and the hits? And are people really listening? Like, I've just
Mhm,
been constant doing this work. And periodically people will let me know this is a great thing you're doing. Like, I'm so glad you're doing this. Like, it's
mhm,
wonderful. But ultimately, I've always said, I'm like, I'm not governed by comments because I don't even have the comments on. you
mhm.
know, I'm just putting it out there and letting people just, it's food for thought. And there's just some things that I've just unconsciously done. Like, I realized I had a hard time, making my way through this community at first, but I also approached it in a simplistic way. I was just like, okay, secure the venue and then work your way to opening night. And so that's what I would do. And but what excited me about all of this is that there was a lot of responses were like obvious choice, great choice. Yes, this makes sense. And so as long as the community thinks this makes sense, I feel really good about that. But I also think for me, because I did serve on the board of the Theater Alliance of Greater Philadelphia, the final
Mm,
board. And so I have that knowledge of the previous organization and this
mhm.
organization, that there are some things that at the time when we folded as the alliance, those things were not things that we were looking for at the time. Like the services and the programs that we provided were not everything we wanted at the time. But I feel like some of those things are things we need now.
Are there any specific examples you wanna say at this point?
So in the past, we have done annual auditions.
Mhm.
And those satisfy the EPA requirement for many companies who are producing in the season. And so, if we
And say
can,
EPA for folks listening, what does that mean?
sorry, equity professional auditions.
Gotcha.
So if as an organization, if Theater Philadelphia can make that happen so that all of the producing companies come to one space and all of the artists who want to audition for them come to one space, they're all
Mhm.
getting this all checked off without having to go to like 10 different EPAs.
Mm,
And this just makes it easier for the rest of the community. Now, I know in the past there were some concerns about this program because of like who the companies were sending to the auditions. Like, if you're sending your intern who's like 2 days old in the company, how are they going to effectively assess who was on the stage and whether they'd be good for your company?
right,
And
yeah.
so, some of the things we'd want to make sure is that your artistic staff is coming. Like, these artists aren't wasting their time, and we don't expect you to waste your time either. But, sending somebody who can't artistically speak for your organization is not going to serve anyone. And so we want to make sure that if we do that, that you're not in the mindset of just amassing a database,
Yeah,
but you
or,
are
like, just
active.
checking something off.
Yeah, but you are actively looking to meet the needs of your upcoming season.
Mhm.
So that's one of the things I would like to do. The rest of it is I've been having many conversations with the community and other stakeholders in and around us that are very much like us.
Mhm.
And I do feel like, when I was in technology retail, they called this prepping the bench, making sure that there are people behind you who can rise to these similar positions. And I think in our community, with the loss of many educational institutions and the
Yeah.
dwindling of arts education, that we need to make sure that our bench is well prepped. So our organizations have to work to make sure that there are people who are still interested in entering into our space
Mhm.
and that they can meet with people who are already in these roles to understand the needs of these roles, like the things that you need to understand and know to have in your arsenal so that you can go after jobs like this. I was saying the other day, like, who goes into a theater program saying, I want to be a general manager? You know, and there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with the general manager role, but I think it's a role that you sort of end up in. It's not a role that has a direct path of explanation
Mhm.
and education. So a
Yeah.
lot of that is you sort of learn as you go. And
Mhm.
so perhaps if we can gather like-minded people to share in a resource that prepares people for this role and other roles, perhaps this is how Theater Philadelphia can be more of a value to the community, not just promoting to get butts in seats, because
Mhm.
that just seems like such an empty prospect to say that our only goal is to get butts in seats.
I mean, important, but I really like what you say about it's the butts and seats thing is very, like, that's just the problem that's immediately before you. Like, how
Mhm.
do we fill up this show? And even if you do that successfully, what have you done toward the sustainability of the sector in
Yes.
general? Like you're talking about, like, how are we cultivating our leadership? How are we it's so cool for people to, like you're saying, understand more about, hey, maybe like lots of people dream of being an actor or a playwright, maybe, but we don't grow up being like, I'm going to be an operations manager.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the artists don't have a space or an institution where they can work at without these roles, and these are also really exciting, important roles, so
And
yeah.
everybody doesn't have an apprenticeship
Yeah,
or a robust internship,
yeah,
because interning, you know, to have an internship in your organization, you need to have the time
yes.
to educate and work with interns. You
We run into
can't,
this all the time at
yeah.
BSR.
It's hard to just drop people in, like, some of the default things you do is like filing, but that's not gonna help them run a theater company.
Mhm,
I mean, not alone. Like, they need to be able to be hands-on with you, and you have to allocate that time too, and so sometimes a lot of people you're already a small organization, and you're like, "I can't work with, like, 6 interns, although I could benefit from 6 interns. I just I don't have the time to sort of train them and
mhm,
then move them forward," and so that's sort of a hiccup there, and so I think if there's other things that people can go through, like a webinar, some sort of talk back discussion, a
mhm,
roundtable where they
mhm,
sat and was like, "Oh my god, like 5 general managers came together and talked about it." They were from different sized organizations, but they talked very similarly about their struggles with equity and how to deal with reporting and cash flow and things
mhm,
like that. Like, if they can all come together and communicate about similar opportunities that they all have, and people in the community can listen to that and provide feedback and so on, then I think that those things kind of help, because they'll also see whoever was on this panel as people that they can reach out to,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
I do think we spend a lot of time putting our artists in the spotlight, but not the people who actually support them. And
mhm,
so I think that there is a bit of a balance on that, because the ticket buyer wants to know that the show is going to be good and that it's got a professional team on it. But the supporter of an organization wants to understand that you've got a good team. And so I think that there's a balance there too, of not just showcasing your work, your production, but showcasing your team as well.
yeah. Well, on that note about good teams, let's wrap up for today. Darnell, thank you for joining me in the virtual studio today. This has been a really fun conversation,
Yeah.
I think really insightful as usual.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
yeah, well, we're so excited to see what you do, and we also are so excited and honored to have you continuing with the BSR podcast. We love your conversations here and are looking forward to many more.
Absolutely. Plan to keep those moving as long as my schedule doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah.